All right, listen. We have to talk about it, okay? I can't even emphasize how much it needs to be discussed, okay? So, I was asked to do a TOTP, Thoughts of the Perk, on Territorial Imperative, right? The Huntress exclusive perk. What it does is, when survivors are in the basement, when you're more than 32 meters away from the entrance, then you can see their aura for 3 seconds. And it only gets triggered every 25 seconds. Here's the truth, I have no idea how long it's been since this perk has been the way that it is. Like, I don't even know the history behind the perk. All I know is that this perk's effect has been the same effect for as like long as I could possibly know, and it's just like the worst perk in the entire game. Like, it's worse than the worst survivor perk. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't even require, like, it just doesn't matter. This is the worst perk in the whole game. And like, I'm gonna quickly just like skim and check and see if there was a buff for this perk back in 3.0.0 where they lowered the cooldown to, I think, what it currently is, to like, no, to 20 to 20, yeah, because I have the green version. So this is a 20-second version of the perk. So every 20 seconds you can see the aura of the person for 3 seconds while they're inside the basement, and that's literally all that it does. See, so this perk, I in turn have never seen this perk. I don't even think I've seen Huntress even go for the Adept because of this perk by itself. You know what I mean? So something is not really, like, this perk needs to be like eruption buff. You know what I mean? Like, it just needs to be so cracked buff that you see this perk, and it just needs to be meta, because I honestly can't say that this perk was ever really like a good perk. I honestly don't know, because when I you know, the one time I think I tried playing killer as a Huntress and I only had her perks to go with, I used this perk and I didn't know even when it activated because I had no idea. So I think that, like, the fact that it's a, you know, it's supposed to be like an aura reading perk for the basement from a distance kind of thing, is like, it offers no value. There's no point in using it. It just doesn't do anything. So I think that this perk, it just needs to get taken from the bottom of the tier list all the way to the top. That's literally what I think, truly. So I think, like, I haven't really theorized how they could essentially buff this perk, but the fact that it's an aura perk, that needs to not be a thing. It needs to just not be a thing. And the basement distance thing, I think, like, it's not like the worst case scenario that it's like if you're away from the basement then it activates. Like, I don't think that's an issue, but the fact that all you get out of it is a 3-second aura check that you can look at every 20 seconds, it doesn't do anything for you, right? So I think that they need to take this perk and make it exceptionally dangerous, so that the effectiveness of it is just like, you don't want to really get a reason to just go to the basement. You know what I mean? Like, that's really how I think. Because, like, if you're playing with the basement, like if you're playing Trapper, for example, and let's say you get a person in the basement with Trapper and you trap the basement, that's the only reason to use this perk, is when you know that someone is gonna go get the pickup. But by the time that you even realize that they're gonna go for the pickup on the basement and try and figure it out, like, you can just run over there and find out, you know, because, like, your traps will already set off the fact that the person is even doing what they're doing to get in the basement. So I think that this perk was designed initially to be kind of like a check, you know, like, you just want to make sure that there's nobody in the basement for any reason. But, like, 32 meters is far, and even more importantly, like, the fact that it's only like a 3-second trigger every 20 seconds is kind of nuts, right? So you basically get to see the survivor's aura of anybody inside there for 20 seconds. Now, even if you remove the cooldown trigger time to 20 and just take it out entirely, it still isn't going to be like that useful. So I think what this perk should do is just like a timer based like additive of buffs. So for example, I think that, like, the aura reading is honestly fine. Like, it's okay if you keep that in there when you're away from the but it shouldn't just be like a, like what I would rewrite this to say is like, you know, for every 3 seconds that you're in the basement, then it kind of gives you like a listing of what buffs. You know, like how Pentimento is, where like if you get Pentimento and you get like a Hex Totem, then it does like a debuff, and then 2 totems is another debuff, and it stacks. This perk should just do that. So I think it should have 2 effects. The first effect is for every 3 seconds that you're in the basement, right? Like that makes it dangerous to go into the basement where you go in and out, getting the chest. Or like if you get the hook, then you won't get a lot of debuffs unless there's more than one person being hooked. Like if you have one person hooked and you go for the pickup on the hook in the basement and you get out, then you won't walk out with as many debuffs. But if you go for get a chest, then you guarantee get every debuff that's imaginable. So like truly speaking, I think that, you know, once you start entering the stairs of the basement and you like, you know, like that dip where like the first set of stairs, platform, second set of stairs, basement, as soon as your feet touch that first platform, right, then the timer starts. So then after 3 seconds, boom, you get a blindness, right? After like I would even say 5 seconds. It might, 3 might be a little bit too much, but 5 seconds I would say, right? So 5 seconds, boom, you get blindness. 5 more seconds, you get oblivious. Then at 5 more seconds, then you get like, I was gonna say like broken, but that wouldn't really make sense unless you were injured. But maybe, you know what I mean? And then while you're in the basement, like the buffs don't go away, right? They stay on you while you're still in the basement. And then I think if, like, let's say whatever the timer that it takes, I feel like you gotta like kind of record the time, right? But when you touch that platform, you go inside the basement and you go for the chest. However long it takes to go into the chest, or to go into the basement to grab the chest item, pick up the item, and then get out and touch that platform again and touch the stairs, whatever timer that takes, if you don't have any way to increase your speed to get in and get out, then you get exposed. That's what it should do. So when you walk out, and then the timer for that like lingers for like 30 or 40 seconds or something when you leave the basement. If you go back in the basement, the timer resets. Because that way, like in a manner of speaking, if you go in and get 1 unhook, then you only walk out of there with blindness. Or yeah, basically. And then if you go in there and get 2 unhooks, then you might walk out of there with like oblivious, right? And then if you stay there for, what is it, like 20 seconds, I guess, then you have your blind, your oblivious, and your exposed, and your aura gets revealed to the kill. Like all those debuffs are stackable, and they get added to the perk because you're in the basement. Like the perk needs to be able to make you not want to go into the basement unless it's like a life or death situation, or you're like desperate. You know what I mean? Like if you just go into the basement and then you can see the killers or the aura can just like be seen by the killer, then like that's it. It's in like whatever. You know what I mean? Like the killer wouldn't even be bothering to bring that perk in the first place. You got to give the killers a reason to bring this perk. Like long story short. So like literally 5 seconds, boom, you get blind. 10 seconds, you get oblivious. 15 seconds, you get your aura reveal, and then 20 seconds, you get exposed. And like literally, if you go for the chest. If you go into the basement, get the chest, and you walk out of the basement, by the time you try and walk out of the basement, even if you try to like speed run it out of there, you still get exposed. But if you go for 1 unhook, maybe 2 unhooks, right, then you might walk out with like blindness or maybe even like oblivious. Because then again, theoretically, right, you would have to like go in and you have to like kind of dip out of the basement and then dip back in, right, in order to like reset the timer. Like that'd be fine, right? But I think that you gotta really, if people want to like mess around in the basement for so long, you gotta give them a reason to not want to go in the basement unless it's like a life or death desperado situation. So I think that putting like a bunch of debuffs on it, like a Pentimento style debuff on it when anyone's in the basement, and like get rid of the meters thing too. Oh, maybe, I don't know, maybe you should keep it actually, because I feel like it should need to have some kind of like check. So maybe you keep the meters thing. So, but again, like the timer for all that stuff though will linger for a long time. Like I would say like even, you know, 40 to 60 seconds if you really want to go that far, right, just to forcibly keep people out of the basement, right? Because then I don't think that you'll necessarily get the Territorial Imperative like icon appearing on your HUD as a survivor, but you will just start getting debuffed for being in the in the basement, and then people are gonna be like, oh crap, I gotta get out of here because like this is gonna start getting worse and worse with time. So like even if you go back in and open the base, open the chest. Well, I guess like theoretically you could like step out of the basement area and then go back and get the chest and still try to like tap at it once in a while. But still though, like the buffs and the timer like are stackable, right? So I feel like the only way that the buff would go away is if like you are away and the debuff like goes away, because the timer doesn't stop, right? Because like so I think in a theoretical, like if I go in and get blindness and then I get oblivious and then walk out, the timer takes like 40 to 60 seconds, right? So if I do that and then wait that long just to get a chest item, like that's where that desperado kicks in like hardcore, right? Like if you really have no options to go for a chest except for that one last chest, then like maybe, right? Because like I said, this is the worst perk I think in the entire universe of the game for for what it's worth. So it would be actually phenomenal to see that this perk gets some kind of crazy bump up that like people start running it and you're like, oh crap, because you got to have a reason to be afraid of the perks that the killers bring to the table, and like not let it be like regression stuff, but still make it be like exposed or something to keep people on their toes. So yeah, I think that this perk needs a ton of love. This perk hasn't been like loved by the game, in its entire longevity history of the game existing with this perk coming out. This perk hasn't literally been changed like ever, except for the cooldown timer. But the affectation of the perk has been the same same effect since literally the birth of the Huntress in the game. So they need to buff the crap out of this perk. Like long story short, like I said, give it like a stackable additive like style of debuffing, and just make it incredibly like conscious, dangerous ways, right, to make survivors go into the basement. And I think that this perk might even be a little bit better than it was before. It won't be like a top tier perk because you can avoid this perk entirely as a survivor if you just don't ever go in the basement. But if a killer starts putting people in the basement, right, then you start to let that perk come into play. And I think that with certain killers you might actually start to see that kind of like snowball a little bit. So it's a perk that can be played with if you added effects like that. But the way that it is right now, perk is awful. So this perk needs a lot of love. So that's my thoughts on the perk.